Today I have a very special guest on this episode. It's Dr. Malcolm MacKay, all the way from Melbourne, Australia. It's 7:30 in the morning, so I'm very grateful for him for sharing part of his weekend to be with us on this discussion. Dr. MacKay has 35 years of general practitioner experience. His clinic is in Melbourne, Australia. He has a huge background in plant-based nutrition. In fact, he is a fellow, has been awarded a fellowship of the Australasian Society of Lifestyle Medicine. He has completed the board certification in lifestyle medicine, and he finds that balance inside his practice between talking about nutrition and lifestyle with his patients and also with the medication side of things and the more classic allopathic approach. His interest and passion is running some immersions in Victoria, Australia, where patients are able to come over a 6-day period and immerse themselves in lifestyle improvements, and he has seen tremendous results from running those, and in fact has another one coming up in a few weeks and has been running them around 4 a year, and it's a growing and very exciting part of what he does. So Dr. MacKay, thank you so much for joining us to have a discussion today about lifestyle medicine, inflammatory arthritis, and what it's like being a doctor in today's situations.
Thank you, Clint, for having me on your podcast.
Yeah, and I did say MacKay, whereas when we last met, I introduced you from stage at the Doctors for Nutrition conference, and I said MacKay, and I got in trouble for that, didn't I? You jumped on me.
Yeah, I must have been feeling twitchy. Usually I just accept the MacKay, particularly when I'm in the United States.
Yes, well, they are a little bit of the MacKay rather than the MacKay. Now, let's talk about how you got interested, first of all, into becoming a doctor. I mean, was this something that, like as a child, we run around with pretend stethoscopes and stuff and we say, oh, we want to be a doctor, and you just followed through on that? Or was it something you had, just came to get into after you found that you just fell in love with university?
You know, I'd love to give a passionate presentation about how my family doctor saved my grandmother or something like that. But it was actually sort of assumed. It was sort of assumed that I'd probably go and study medicine. It was sort of my father was a doctor, my mother's father was a doctor, his father was a doctor. It was sort of a bit of in the family. Although I think towards the end of my school life, I more considered that maybe I'd go into medicine and, become a researcher. And I think at the time when I entered medicine, I sort of thought I was very interested in human genetics. Interestingly, before long, I sort of realized that, the genetics that we've inherited, the genes we've inherited, are not truly the determinants of our health. Yes, they determine our risk levels, and sometimes we inherit one that's, a definite, causes definite effects. But most of the time, the sort of, as they say, genes put the car into drive, but lifestyle pushes the accelerator. So, and how did I become interested? Well, there was only a few. I think my family, my father always emphasized the importance of nutrition, but it was like, you need to eat meat and eggs and those sort of foods that make us strong and smart and things. And partway through the medical course, I was getting back into distance running, which I'd done at school. And, I was about 3 years out of school, and 4 years. And so, I was interested in sports performance. And we had one lecturer, a crusty old cardiologist, who showed us gruesome slides of stroked out brains and heart attacks and blocked arteries and gangrenous legs, and talked about this all over the body disease of artery disease, of atherosclerosis, the cholesterol plaques, inflammatory blocking of arteries. And he called it the inevitable process of atherosclerosis. Like, it will always happen as you get older. But here are some risk factors. And then within the same sort of semester, someone else giving a lecture told us that there were groups of people in the world like the Highland Papua New Guinea people, who have very low fat, very low salt diets. In other words, in Papua New Guinea, they were just eating sweet, never get artery disease as long as they live. And for me, it was like, what? Number one disease, it's inevitable. And there are people who are poor and have little education and almost no medicine, and they don't get I was sort of in on this, and as other diseases came up in the course, it was always the same story. Where do you get the most rheumatoid arthritis? Where do you get most ulcerative, inflammatory bowel disease, diabetes? It was always the same diet and lifestyle risk factors. Right from the start, I considered exercise was important. Anyway, I was in on this. And so, I was going to have my cake and eat it too, have all the luxuries of the Western world and eat the sort of minimally processed, low fat, low salt, plant-based foods that these peoples ate. And it seemed to work for me. It's like before long, I ran a 2:32 marathon, won a couple of triathlons. So it seemed to work. All my colleagues thought I was crazy, and I can lead on from that story. And it was sort of a year or two later, someone gave me one of the Pritikin books, and it was like, so I wasn't crazy after all. Anyone who's sort of got their mind open and eyes open as they study, medical science, will sort of come across this material. And it's like, Nathan Pritikin. And that sort of led to an era after I graduated where we had a very active Pritikin Health Association across Australia. And so I became president of the South Australian branch, and I would give presentations, monthly public meetings, or introduce other key speakers. We even had someone talk about gut microbiome in the late 1980s.
Wow.
Yeah. I remember he said, humans are like cows back to front. Cows ferment up the front end of their gut. We ferment down the back end.
I love it. I can't think of too many other ways we're like cows, but I like that one. And so you said that all your, your physical capabilities improved, especially with your long distance running. It's kind of famous for, plant-based diet's kind of famously successful for any kind of long distance endurance kind of stuff. And this was obviously in line also with, your studies and as you said, joining and becoming the president of the Pritikin movement and stuff in Australia. And this was way back before any of this became trendy, in inverted commas, because today, you got celebrities going plant-based and it's kind of become trendy. It wasn't even trendy by any stretch going back sort of 12 years when I started doing this, let alone when you started. I mean, you really must have raised some eyebrows back then.
They thought I was a bit crazy, I'd smoked too much weed or something. But I guess, I was sort of a bit sort of, I was just, typical obsessive, determined, sort of not very extroverted medical student. So it's sort of like I just did it.
Yeah, just went for it. Now, in your practice, you obviously see people coming in throughout the day which have all different range of health conditions. How do you find that balance between wanting to impart the most foundational help you can, being, what they put into their bodies and how they live their lives, versus the need to relieve the symptoms pharmaceutically? So how do you assess on a case-by-case basis how to deal with that dilemma?
Whole foods, plant-based nutrition, and the whole healthy lifestyle package is not sort of mutually exclusive with pharmaceutical treatments. If someone had a really bad inflammatory rheumatoid arthritis, I'm going to want to use drugs to settle down those joints as they sort of, cause a lot of pain, stiffness, and self-destruct. So I'll want to use drugs to settle down the process, but at the same time, we'll want to bring in the diet and lifestyle measures, and then over a period of time, like the patients with high cholesterol and heart disease, I'll leave them on their cholesterol tablet, but every few months I'll test it again, and as it keeps, and each time it's within the recommended targets and things, I'll drop their cholesterol drug another step. and often end up, and the same with blood pressure. I'll keep checking their blood pressure, looking at their home readings. So I won't immediately stop those, but as their bio measures sort of improve, or in the case of arthritis, as their joint pains improve, I'll gradually back off their medication. So the lifestyle, it's not sort of exclusive.
Mm,
Um,
I love
a little
that. Yeah.
bit more about that practice, like I think in the plant-based world, people think that if I say to someone, look, the acne you've got, and if you just change your diet and ate less dairy foods, it'd sort of probably go away, and you wouldn't need this hazardous sort of drug treatment for it. And the person would go, oh, thank you, doctor. No one's ever told me about the link between dairy and acne. No, they go, I don't eat much dairy, or my diet's good. One time, I don't think I was being too tactless. One time I even had someone sort of thump the desk because they stated they were already vegetarian or something. So, when you just sort of want to practice lifestyle medicine, it's actually quite difficult because you get tied up with this, like talking politics and religion. And so I sort of regard it as sort of like I'm casting out the bait, I'm dangling the carrot. If a man comes to me, guy in his 40s with high cholesterol, on cholesterol tablets and blood pressure tablets and maybe Viagra for that little problem, I'll say to him, look, as well as taking the cholesterol tablet, it wouldn't make much sense to eat foods that raise cholesterol, because when you eat chicken, eggs, I start naming the foods they think might be healthy. When you eat salmon and chicken and eggs and meat and dairy, they'll make your cholesterol go up from wherever it is to start with, because that stops them arguing that it's genetic. Wherever your cholesterol is at to start with, eating more of these foods will make it go up. But if you eat more things like oats and beans, they'll actually bring it down. And so that's sort of like you dangle a carrot, and they might sort of inquire more, or you just tell someone that, oh yeah, I've been reading lately that with say the lady with acne who's sort of really too old to still have acne. It's like there've been quite a lot of studies showing that dairy protein's particularly bad for acne, and and if they sort of just glare at me. You just have to drop the subject, and then you get further into the consult and they're complaining about some other medical symptom that you're thinking again, oh, that's another one related to the diet. And then sometimes you just sort of have to keep it zipped. But sometimes there are surprises. I once wrote in someone's file like um, uh, not open to lifestyle change for this condition or something. In other words, looked angry and was flat out rejected it, but you've got to be nice in your case notes. And then about 6 months later, she's saying, what's the best plant milk, doctor? So you never know when you sort of when you sort of just plant the seed, you never know when it will grow. I mean, it might be that they end up with some niece or someone who sort of talks to them, or they watch the Game Changers. And your little seed you planted may, I sort of always think that the seed I planted, even if it sort of looks like it's just rejected, one day it might grow.
Yeah, I really like how you said about those touch points, because I was listening to something, gosh, I don't know where I got this information, but I was hearing about how these days we're just confronted with so much information constantly because we're connected to the internet, that back in the day we might have, as a consumer, maybe purchased something based on a billboard and seeing something only once or maybe twice, seeing it on a billboard and then maybe a TV commercial, and you've made your decision based on that repetition of only 2 touch points. But now apparently we need to see something like 20 times before we think, okay, that's penetrated through all the other noise. And so, I think that the more little touches that people can hear about these positive influences in their life, the better. And it may not, as you said, be in your consult with this patient that they make the decision to improve the amount of plants that they eat, but it may contribute, and that's crucial. Are there any favorite kind of conditions that you just start rubbing your hands together and say, "Oh, I can wipe this out"? Are there ones that when you get the right patient willing to do something, you get excited because of the somewhat simplicity in treating it with a lifestyle change?
Some of the gut conditions. Like, when people have irritable bowel syndrome, and, they have diarrhea, and they have constipation and diarrhea
Oh,
and
yeah.
pains and things. I always say to them, the constipation part of it, I can fix that. Definitely, we can fix that easily. Yeah, yeah. So, just sort of taking the diet from being, processed food and animal products to actually even containing a moderate amount of fiber containing whole plant foods can turn that right around. And sometimes even with just dropping dairy foods for quite a few conditions, just dropping the dairy foods can sometimes make all the difference,
Would
whether
you
it's high cholesterol or acne or gut symptoms.
Right. And would you say that that is one of the first things that you like to encourage people as a first step?
Yeah, sometimes, although other times, it's sort of easier to sort of have an add-in approach. Like, this person's really set on the paleo sort of diet, and then it's like, well, can you add in some, oats, or can you add in just a small amount of legumes per day?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
So
like that too.
sometimes I might sort of take stop dairy, and other times, it might be more appropriate just to sort of take that add in, because a lot of people's diets are so minimal in plant foods, in fruit and vegetables, that just adding in a cup of cooked vegetables a day can make a difference.
I heard something frightening. Uh, I guess it's one of these sort of frightening stats you hear about US nutrition, and I believe that the most common two vegetables Americans consume in their diet are potatoes and tomatoes, and the way they consume it by large is French fries and ketchup
Pizza, ketchup. Mm.
and pizza. Right. So
Mm.
they're the two vegetables going in, and the format going in is pretty lousy. So, I
Mm.
mean, the situation is really, really severe, isn't it? I mean, whilst you and I have colleagues and friends and probably spend most of our time talking to others who think similarly to us around plant-based nutrition and this kind of lifestyle, the general public are quite in a different boat. It's quite remarkable. I mean, have you got any humorous stories of or examples of some people who might come into your clinic who virtually eat no plants or just are just on extremely poor diets?
Um, yeah, I mean, I've had one patient who was on a carnivore diet for a period of time, like, no, just meat and eggs, and his gut was so bad that he'd add any small amount of anything slightly fermentable, like, any starches, grains, and he's, oh, it gives me a tummy ache. But he also said, look, yeah, with this diet I get a bit of diarrhea every day, but there's one day a week when I'll ease off on just eating meat and my gut's better on that day. And it's like, go figure.
It's crazy. Actually, just last month, at the time of this recording, Joe Rogan, very popular podcaster here in the States, did a whole month on the carnivore diet and, showed his physique at the end compared to his less sort of sculpted physique at the start. I think that when someone with a very high profile and a very large audience goes on an extreme diet like that, people without too much, self investigation can just blindly follow and try these things. And, it's not a game. This isn't like, a game that you can switch off. These are our bodies. This is our human existence. And I consider those kind of extreme approaches to be, dangerous if people aren't careful.
Look, this is a long term. This is going to be a tsunami of chronic disease. The whole low carb diet movement's creating a future disaster. The more years you have, inflamed bodies and inflamed gut and high cholesterol, etc. The more years you have it for, the earlier you're going to get heart disease. You're going to get heart disease and dementia more and earlier, and more arthritis, more inflammatory gut disease than our parents got. It's a disaster. And in Australia, low carb's really popular, and it's been popularized. Partly we can blame the corrupted part of CSIRO nutrition with their, CSIRO low carb diet. Um, a lot of the doctors are onto this in Australia. And you're like, it sounds really good. You're going on a low carb diet, so you're not having sugar and all those processed junk foods. But if I said to you, Clint, you could be much healthier if you stopped eating whole grains, legumes, and fruits and ate more meat and fat-rich dairy foods and processed plant fats instead, you'd laugh at me. You'd think I was joking. But when you actually sort of couch it in terms of, sugar is bad and low carb, it sort of doesn't sound as silly. A lot of my colleagues, even some of those in lifestyle medicine in Australia and New Zealand, are going down this path, and I just like it. It just does my head in. Like, eat more of the foods that make us sick. Like, eat more meat and dairy and oil. It's senseless.
You mentioned oil just before we move on, and I want to hear about your immersions and talk about some examples you may have seen of people improving on the immersions. My nemesis, my enemy to the core, is any kind of vegetable oils, and I'm glad you mentioned that. Give me your clinical recommendations about oil consumption, and also whether or not you and your family allow a little oil.
When I first started this with the Pritikin diet and my obsessive personality, I was really, really strictly super low salt, low fat. Surprisingly, I didn't, faint running or something, but from low salt. But I'm still fairly low salt, almost as low. So right from the start, it was like all fats are bad. I didn't discriminate. And so for me, it was no oil, low fat foods right from the start. We've got a whole page on our website called No Oil, and a how to cook with no oil page attached to it. It's processed food. It's had all the nutrients and fiber stripped away from it. Oil is damaging to the endothelium. I mean, extra virgin olive oil, which is not the olive oil that most people drink, might have a few polyphenols and be less bad. But it's like, if I'm talking to someone about cigarettes, I'm not recommending a less bad cigarette. I'm just going to say don't smoke cigarettes. So, the oil is damaging to the arteries. It's bad for the gut microbiome. And as far as our experience with our immersions go, we see resolution of joint pains, and I think we've even seen it in people who have come there and already been on a reasonably healthy vegan diet, and I think it's because we completely eliminate oil from their diet. When people are still eating a little bit of oil, because it's so high in calories, it's like a super concentrated food. They don't realize how much it's contributing to their daily intake. And if they eat oil at home, then they go out and they don't notice just how high in oil the meal is when they go out or when someone else makes food. I know it's difficult when people go out and other people make their food, but certainly if you're treating disease or trying to have optimal health, oil's one thing to be avoided, just like chicken's something to be avoided. And people would say, is a little bit going to harm me? It's vegan. Well, is a little bit of chicken going to harm you? Yeah, probably.
In the case of inflammatory arthritis, if I was to want to inflict the least harm as possible onto someone who begged me to eat chicken or oil, I would say eat some chicken. Because the impact of the oil, in my view, would create a greater detrimental outcome for that person than the chicken, if we had to choose from either of those two bad things. Let's talk more about your immersions. Tell me where you have them, how people can participate in them, what they can expect, what the food's like. Give us some examples of improvements that people see over and above what you've mentioned with the arthritis.
Yeah, we're up to about immersion number 8, which is on the week after next. It's a live-in event, which we hold in Anglesea on the surf coast of Victoria, about an hour and a half out of Melbourne. We did a pilot, and then we were looking for a venue. We wondered how we could do this. And then a lady, Anita, contacted us and said, look, I've got a vegan cafe and it's less than 100 metres from the Great Ocean Road Resort at Anglesea. and we could get together, and so we did. So we rent, the required number of rooms that we need for people at this huge sort of motel resort, and we use their conference room, and we've set that up, and we're in there. Most days, Jenny and I are giving talks, and we have books for sale, and the lady that has the cafe brings the breakfasts and the lunches and the afternoon air fried potatoes that are very popular up to the venue. On 4 of the nights, we all walk down the road, less than 100 meters to her cafe, which isn't usually open during the week, and we have a meal there. And then usually we watch it. We watch a documentary after dinner. So that's sort of how we do it. And we're very strict about this. Like, we're giving an example of what people need to eat. So, it's like no oil, low salt. Anita has some assistance with this, and we're often onto them and go, hey, no, not too much miso in that, please. We're really onto the oil and the salt, because we've really got to set an example. And when there's a really high level, so the adherents, unless they go down to the local service station and buy a packet of something, really, we've got them captive. And I often joke and say we're monitoring the CCTV at the local service station too. And so the adherence is really, really high. And, even within a few days, within the 6 days, we've seen a number of people, particularly, we see people who sort of, after a few days, often there's some problems. 1 or 2 days in, they're often having a few gut rumbles, and they're sort of, sometimes not feeling that great. As the 6 days goes on, people report that they feel better, they're sleeping better, they feel sharper and more alert, they have more energy. Because we do activities as well. This is sort of a lifestyle immersion where nutrition's the keystone and the biggest focus. But we also, go for a morning beach walk. Where we stay is a 10-minute walk or 10-minute walk along. I say 5 minutes because I'm the running group. A 10-minute walk along the parklands by the Anglesey River, and then we're on the main ocean beach. So 3 of the mornings we do sort of a beach walk, and the 2 other mornings we have someone come in and put on a yoga session. Other things we do, we have someone do a couple of meditation sessions as part of it. I give presentations on other lifestyle things like sleep and things, as well as nutrition. And we do quite a bit of practical stuff, like Jenny talks about calorie density and label reading. And we visit a local supermarket. We've arranged with a local supermarket 10 minutes walk away, or we can drive people if they're not very able-bodied. We actually do a supermarket tour where we walk around and analyze the labels of foods we might commonly purchase. And there's a lot of group support. We usually have about 10 or 15 people there. We sort of cap it at 10, 15. I don't think we've ever gone over 16. And we find there's a really good group interaction. And that's a really important part of it. And the group on their own sort of starts discussing things, and we sort of encourage that on some topics. Let's have a breakout into groups of 3 or 4 and discuss, barriers you're likely to face. So we try and not just give people the perfect diet and lifestyle for the 6 days. We want to send them home fully armed, knowing what to buy, knowing how to cook it. We do. Anita, who provides all the food side of it, she does cooking demonstrations through the week, a number of those. We want people to be fully armed and know how to do it. And we also want people to understand the social barriers and the psychological things about, what drives us to eat rich food and, to binge eat. So we try and, the aim is to actually, by the end of the week, to send people home self-sufficient. And we've started we do meetups. About 6 weeks later, we do a video conference with the group. And then we've got these ongoing video conferences, meetings, where we've started doing short webinars and then a chat to anyone who's been to one of our immersion events. The sort of results, do you mind if I keep talking?
Please, this is fascinating. Just hold your thought. hold your thought. And the reason I wanted to keep talking is because periodically we get requests for Patterson program retreats, and they say, can I go somewhere where it's a live-in immersion style event? And we have not been living in one place long enough to ever sort of get our roots down and then work like you have with somewhere local and organize this. And it's a lot of work. I mean, I'm hearing all this and I appreciate how much work's put in. So what I'm getting at here is if you have the proximity to Victoria, Australia, then I recommend you go to Dr. MacKay's retreat and go and spend 6 days with him and wonderful Jenny. I'm sure that the hospitality would be second to none. You can see how friendly he is. His wife's just the same. And this would be a wonderful opportunity. The no oil is crucial. A lot of folks with rheumatoid find it difficult to find a retreat where they get the cleanliness of what you have discussed, as well as the educational and the other aspects. So please continue, and I want listeners to think that this could be an opportunity for them if they have, again, the proximity. I know Australia's a long way away from the rest of the world, and then Victoria is another step down, a little further still. But the Great Ocean Road, I mean, that's a beautiful part of the world that I've only seen once and would love to go back to. So I hope you've kept that thought that I asked you to hold, and please continue.
Okay. It is a lot of work, and it's not just, it's really the core team. We have a helper person and someone come in and do, yoga and meditation sessions. And we sort of have a helper person who's sort of like a nutrition intern. It's a lot of work, but it's a lot of satisfaction. We really see, we see these quite early, and I provide consultations there. I provide medical consultations, and that's really important. If someone comes in on insulin, we've had a couple of people on insulin for type 2 or type 1.5 diabetes, and for that sort of condition, that sort of drug, the problem with some of those conditions is that you get better too quickly, and so then you don't need as much, and then you have the drug. It's not that the change in diet causes low blood sugar. It's like takes away the cause. And we've had a couple of, looking shaky at meditation in the morning, and I'm going, I think you better eat some of that bread or something over there. And he said, oh, why do you cut my insulin down? And these two people I think of, they both left on about a third to a half of the insulin they had been on, and actually maintained that. I think one of them actually ended up stopping altogether, and the other one, I think, still continues because they've probably got type 1.5 diabetes. We get a lot of satisfaction seeing early in the immersion people's aha moments. We've seen people sometimes in tears when they realise that it's not their fault that they can't help it, but reach for the rich food and eat the rich food, and then people have a real so that's what's going on with my health. And now I understand the nutrition aspect. And then as people we see people transform their health in that period of time. And that gives me more sort of work satisfaction than most of my clinical consulting. Like, here's another blood pressure tablet, you need a certificate for your cold, more paperwork. But to see people really, they wake up and understand things and start to see health trends. That's so satisfying that despite the fact that Jenny and I are like up at 6 a.m, organising the morning walk, giving talks through the day, making sure everything runs smoothly, running in and out and locking and unlocking the seminar room. Up there, down in the restaurant, in the cafe after with Anita, who's still going to do the washing up at that time, at 10 o'clock at night after the documentary is all finished. But we get a lot of satisfaction out of it, even though it's an exhausting week. In terms of some of the transformation, I think you might be interested in the joints. I can think of 3 particular cases. There was one lady who came there with her husband, and she sort of said, right from day one, look, I'm not doing this. I'm still going to eat meat, but he needs this for, I think it was his heart. And about 4 days into it, her chronic knee pain, her knee that always hurt, stopped hurting. And so I was like, oh, my knee stopped hurting. And we had some communication with her. Like about a month later, it's like, well, I've been doing heavy gardening. The knee still doesn't hurt, and I've lost a lot of weight, and I'm doing this 100% with my husband. Another lady had rheumatoid arthritis, and on the lunch on the Friday, on the last day before we all go home, she's making a note on a piece of paper, and she sort of goes, oh, and sort of pauses and moves her thumb on her right hand. And says, oh, that joint's not hurting as much. So that was great. And the other one I can think of is someone who actually had a congenital foot bone deformity. And even though she was already on a pretty healthy diet, this foot would always ache, but especially on a vegan diet. But but after 6 days of the no oil and low fat, like we do have a few nuts and seeds in the cooking, but it's really quite, we go more, and there's plenty of reasons why I'm still with the school of thought of, Pritikin and McDougall and Neil Barnard and Caldwell Esselstyn and Dean Ornish. Gee, everyone seems on the same track there. That we're emphasising the starches, and we sort of deliberately keep the nuts and seeds and avocados quite low, but the oil in particular. Yeah, this lady, by the end of it, her foot stopped hurting, even though she was already on a reasonably healthy vegan diet, and she maintained that after the event.
Yeah,
so there's some examples. Another big example is we've probably done this one, overdone, is Jenny's 83-year-old mum, who often comes to our events, and I think she enjoys the company, and it's sort of like her live-in resort where she gets fed healthy food for the week. She sort of gradually, after I came into Jenny's life, Jenny's mum gradually shifted her diet. It wasn't until her husband passed away and she moved to Ballarat that she tossed out all the oil and everything. And Jenny said she went to visit her mum one day, and her mum normally needs a jar opener, has stiff fingers, had a walking frame. And her mum just said, I'll just go across the room and get it, and bounced out of her chair and bounded across the room. And to Jenny, it was like, never moved like that. And so Jenny's mum sort of says, look, I don't need any special motivation to stick to this sort of no oil, no fish, no animal products diet, because, if I go out and I have one oily meal, then the next day my fingers are stiff again. So she's an example of, you can be over 80 years old and you can still get health improvements and relief from arthritis, pain, and stiffness. It's not to say that she doesn't still have arthritic joints and that she's in perfect health, but so much symptomatic relief so quickly, and so easy when you've really got quite significant, osteorheumatoid arthritis. It doesn't take much to tip you back into it, And I was like, if you're eating, a piece of chicken every second day, and on the other days you're having just a little bit of oil, or you're having too many nuts and seeds as part of your diet, that can be enough. That can be enough to maintain the pain and aching. I remember I had a patient who saw me several times, this lady, and I think it was difficult in her family sort of context for her, and she never quite stopped the oil, and she never quite got off the prednisolone, and her rheumatoid arthritis, sort of finger pain and stiffness, never quite went away.
Oh, absolutely. Can attest to that. And I'm sure everyone listening or watching this is nodding right now if they have inflammatory arthritis and they've just cheated a little bit here and there on those sort of foods. The impact can be swift and quite aggressive. So we have to be very, very careful on our discipline, really. Someone that I thought of when you were talking about Jenny's mother, just as we come close to wrapping this up, was my own mum, who has never had any symptoms of autoimmunity, and nor has my dad. However, they went on a trip to Thailand and spent a couple of weeks in Thailand and ate out every meal, all of the, classic Thai meals like your pad Thais and all of the style of cooking that Thai folks are, doing every day, which is always stir fries and always some kind of vegetable oil underneath the cooking. And Mum came home with stiff hands, like she found the closing of her hands to be problematic. And it was worrying her and bothering her. And I said, Mom, I said, I think that it's all the oil and possibly just the different foods on top of just the oil that she consumed whilst in Thailand. And I said, eat tons and tons of leafy greens now that you're home. Really get away from any unnecessary meats, because they've been mostly plant-based for several years since they saw my transformation, which is bizarre and amazing, because they live on a farm and, they're rural Australia where it's classic kind of, meat sort of heavy.
Mm.
And it all went away. It all went away again a couple of weeks after she got back from overseas. But, for someone who doesn't have a pre-existing condition, or that we knew of, it can show how quickly things can shift. And so when you do have an active baseline level of inflammation, then yes, the effect of adding something detrimental to that when the flame is already burning is quick and nasty. So,
and you mentioned the green leafy vegetables, and was Robin Tudor calls them, naturopath Robin Tudor, she calls them GLVs. And a big plug for green leafy vegetables. Like they're like whether you're trying to improve your artery function and you've got heart disease, or whether you're trying to dampen down inflammatory joint disease. Green leafy vegetables are crucial. I mean, Jenny and I, we have a side of steamed kale with balsamic vinegar as an entree to our breakfast, because I've started to sort of think more and more that these are things to eat several times a day, the green leafy vegetables.
Yeah, well, people who follow my podcast know I'm obsessed by it. And, it's basically, in my phrase is greenomania. You just can't get more greens into you. So, I'll often finish a meal with I'll have salad with lunch and dinner, and often the last thing I'll eat I'll save some leafy greens to finish off with, so that my teeth end up having them in my mouth for my oral probiotics. I will make sure that I also use the leafy greens as a counter cavity strategy, because they're so good at mopping up sugars on the teeth. And of course, just so fantastic for anti-inflammatory. So, I just think that in terms of the most important thing in the diet, other than the calorie providing foods, are our leafy greens. So I'm glad you put them at such a high priority in your family as well. Well, Dr. MacKay, thanks so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom with us early in the morning. And I'm very grateful. And I know, and I wanted to plug the fact that you also do Skype calls to people in Australia, because it's very hard to find a doctor who is also interested in supporting a plant-based nutrition lifestyle and offering that real niche insight into how to find that balance and when to focus on the pharmaceutical emphasis and when it can be okay to back off a little bit. So tell us what your website is. Tell us how people can contact you via Skype, and any other thing you'd like to share.
So like our main nutrition website is the Whole Foods Plant-Based Health website. We have the Facebook page, Plant-Based Health Australia. You can find out more about the telehealth or Skype consultations on drmalcolmmackay.com.au. So that's just drmalcolmmackay.com.au. Now, I'm only licensed within Australia, so I only conduct telehealth consultations with people who are in Australia. And it's like an ordinary consultation, except I can't reach over and look down your throat. But for chronic disease, it's often like, you can show me your blood sugar record, you can show me your blood pressure, and I can order pathology tests and email people pathology requests. We can do all of that. I guess, the person may have their usual local doctor who may, like, oh, the diets, keep doing what you're doing, or worse. But yeah, I can help people with little bits of input about, in particular, as they, I can sort of help them to fine tune what they're doing with their diet and lifestyle. And then provide medical input on how to safely, hopefully, start deprescribing some of their medications.
Yeah, that's what everyone wants to hear. Deprescribing. I've never had that phrase pass me by before, but I love it. I love it. Tapering is a word that we always use. Tapering medications comes up a lot because of the sort of frequent use of prednisone and other steroids within the rheumatoid community, is where they always get tapered. But yeah, deprescribing. Fantastic. There's the word for the day. Thank you. Well, I hope everyone's enjoyed having you share your wisdom, and I certainly have myself. So thanks very much, and I hope your immersion that's coming up in just a week or so from now goes really, really well, and that so hopefully some of the people who've witnessed this episode might come join you in the future. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Clint. We look forward to seeing some of those people. Thank you.